The rain fell in thin silver threads outside the glass windows of a quiet cafe in downtown Chicago. The streets were wet, the lights blurred into soft halos, and a man in a dark grey suit sat alone in the corner booth, motionless, his coffee untouched, his eyes hollow. He looked like he belonged to another world, a man who once had everything, now carrying the weight of something invisible and unbearable. The waiter passed him by twice, unsure whether to ask if he wanted anything else. The few customers scattered around whispered quietly. They recognized him. Everyone did. Daniel Hart, the billionaire CEO of Hart Technologies, the youngest man ever to make the Forbes list. But tonight he looked nothing like the pictures in magazines. His tie was loosened, his hair slightly messy, and there was something broken in the way he stared into the cup before him, as if it held every regret he ever had. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of compassion, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel, Kindness of Americans. Your support helps us spread true stories that remind the world that love and empathy still exist. Daniel had built an empire from nothing. He had started at 21 with a laptop and a dream in his college dorm room, coding through sleepless nights. His company had changed the way people worked, made him famous, and put him among the richest in the country. But in chasing everything the world told him mattered, success, recognition, control, he had lost the things that made life worth living. His marriage had crumbled under the weight of his obsession with work. His wife, Claire, had begged him to slow down, to be there for their little girl, Emma, who used to wait by the window every evening for her daddy to come home. But Daniel never did. He was always in another city, another boardroom, another meeting, until one winter night, a car crash took Claire's life while driving to pick Emma up from school because Daniel had promised he would, but didn't show up. He had been on a call, closing a multi-million-dollar deal. The guilt had never left him. Now Emma lived with her grandmother in another state. She barely spoke to him anymore. His empire still stood, but his heart was in ruins. The world still called him successful, but he knew the truth. He was the loneliest man alive. That evening, the cafe had been a place to disappear. He wanted to be invisible, to sit among strangers and feel, even for a moment, like an ordinary man. He stared out at the rain, listening to its soft drumming against the glass, thinking how strange it was that the world could go on when someone's entire life had quietly fallen apart. He didn't notice when the door opened and a small figure ran in from the street, shaking the rain off her pink umbrella. She couldn't have been more than 7. Her shoes squeaked as she walked past him toward the counter, clutching a crumpled dollar bill in her tiny hand. Her mother, a tired-looking woman in a nurse's uniform, followed behind, smiling gently at the barista as she ordered a small cup of hot chocolate for her daughter. The girl's laughter, bright and innocent, echoed softly through the quiet cafe, and Daniel found himself looking up. Something about her voice tugged at him, something painfully familiar. The little girl noticed him watching. She tilted her head, curious, then turned back to her mother, whispering something. The mother glanced toward Daniel, her eyes kind but weary, then nodded slightly. Moments later, the girl approached his table. Daniel looked up, startled. She stood there in her yellow raincoat, her curls damp, her eyes shining like warm honey. She looked at him for a long second before asking in the gentlest voice, "Are you okay, sir?" Daniel froze. The simple question, so pure and unexpected, hit him harder than any storm ever could. For a moment he couldn't speak. No one had asked him that in years, not without wanting something in return. He felt something stir inside, something he thought had died long ago. He nodded faintly, but his voice trembled as he said, "Yes, I'm fine." The girl didn't believe him. Children rarely do. She smiled softly, then took something from her pocket, a small pink candy wrapped in shiny paper, and placed it on the table in front of him. "My mum says candy makes people feel better," she said. Then she skipped back to her mother, leaving Daniel staring at the little piece of kindness resting beside his untouched coffee. He picked up the candy, his eyes blurring. It wasn't about the sweetness, it was the innocence behind it, the uncalculated goodness that reminded him of what he had lost. In that moment, something cracked open inside him. He suddenly saw his daughter's face, her laughter, her tiny hands that used to tug on his sleeve saying, "Daddy, come play." He remembered every missed birthday, every broken promise. And now, sitting in a cafe surrounded by strangers, a little girl's kindness made him feel all of it again. He stayed there long after the girl and her mother had left, holding that candy like it was something sacred. When he finally walked out, the rain had stopped, but his tears hadn't. The city lights reflected on the wet pavement as he drove back home in silence, the candy still in his hand. That night, for the first time in years, he didn't open his laptop. Instead, he opened his phone, found his daughter's number, and typed a message he had rewritten 100 times before. "Hi, sweetheart. It's Dad. I miss you." He didn't expect a reply, but a few minutes later his phone buzzed. It was Emma. Just 3 words. "I miss you too." Something inside him broke, then healed. He cried quietly in the dark, holding the phone to his chest. The next morning, Daniel called his assistant and announced he was taking a leave of absence. The board was shocked. He had never taken a day off in 10 years, but Daniel didn't care. He booked a flight the same afternoon and went to see his daughter. When she opened the door and saw him standing there, she didn't speak. She just ran into his arms, and he held her as tightly as he could, whispering apologies he should have said long ago. For days, he stayed in that small house by the coast with Emma and his mother-in-law. They walked by the beach, cooked together, and watched the sunset every evening. Daniel began to realize that peace had nothing to do with power or money. It was hidden in moments like this, in the warmth of holding the hand of someone who still loved him despite his mistakes. And all of it had started because a little girl, a stranger, had cared enough to ask, "Are you okay, sir?" Months passed. Daniel returned to the city, but not to the same life. He restructured his company, creating new programs to support mental health for overworked employees and their families. He started funding schools and shelters for children in need. Whenever reporters asked what had changed him, he smiled and said, "A child once gave me a candy when I needed it most." He never revealed more, but inside, he carried that moment like a quiet miracle. Sometimes, on rainy evenings, Daniel still went back to that cafe. He would sit in the same corner booth, order a coffee, and watch people pass by. He never saw the little girl again, but her kindness lived on in every good thing he did afterward, because one small act of compassion had rebuilt a man the world thought was already whole. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to Kindness of Americans to help us keep sharing stories that remind the world that even the smallest kindness can change a life.